Hey everybody, today we are going to be talking about your favorite movies. I asked you guys to tell me what some of your favorite movies are and why you feel that way about them, and I'm going to react to them. Anytime I do one of these, of course, there's always going to be that obligatory comment where somebody's like, well, I don't care what everybody else's favorite movie is. I want to know what your favorite movies are. And there's a reason why I don't really talk about that, because I just don't really think in that way. It's like when somebody asks me my favorite color. I have no idea. I've never had a favorite color. Some days I'm feeling peach, sometimes I'm feeling purple, sometimes I'm feeling blue. It depends. And it's the same with films, but even more so, I'd say. A lot of my feelings on films tends to be kind of splintered, fragmented, whatever you want to say. Some days it's like, oh, this musical dance sequence from this movie is my favorite thing in the world at this moment. And then the next day it could be an image, just a sole image, or like a orchestral climax from a certain scene in a movie. So it's like little pieces might really stick with me for a while, or battle sequences, I don't know. And that's the sort of thing that resonates with me more, I would say, on the daily compared to like a full film experience. Not to say that I don't love full film experiences. Of course I do. And I do have, favorite movies. It's just that they're always changing. They are always shifting around. And if I was going to sit here and tell you what my favorite movies were, all of you would set it in stone, which I understand to a degree because of the platform. But yeah, again, it's not really my thing. So I thought I would just talk about y'all's. Who knows? Maybe there's some overlap in here. First one is Rules of the Game. Renoir made the film back in the 1930s, but it is still relevant to this day. I mean, yeah, it is very relevant to this day. And it's interesting because Renoir, he's obviously a revered filmmaker, but I don't hear Rules of the Game talked about as much as I always assumed I would. I first became aware of the film, I would say maybe in like the mid-2000s or something, and I got my hands on a copy of it. And yeah, on occasion I'll hear about it, but when we're talking about great films of the 1930s, it's really, really hard not to mention Renoir on that list when you think of this film, or in my opinion, The Grand Illusion is my personal favorite. And Rules of the Game, thematically, yes, there's all kinds of things that still resonate today. We're seeing a lot of movies that are about similar things today, talking about class structure and status, all the duplicity that goes on behind the scenes compared to the artifice, which seems, very, very perfect and elegant. But to me, it's always been more like the choreography and the structure, and especially kind of the way that the film is shot. That's really what's very interesting about it. But yeah, I think this is an excellent choice. I wish you went more into detail about why you like the film, but yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of films I wish I could review more, but no one watches them. And they are kind of a lot of work because you want to respect it when it's a historical film of that magnitude. But anyway, next one, The Mummy, 1999. It's an absolute perfect blend of comedy, action, romance, and horror. Evelyn and Rick have one of, if not the best action adventure romances of all time. Their chemistry was perfect. I mean, that's a great choice. I love The Mummy, and it came out when I was a kid, and so I've seen it probably about 80, 90 times. My brother and I both, he can vouch. I think it's a perfect movie for kids. And what I actually do respect a lot about The Mummy is that it respects its source material. It's kind of dabbling and pulling from the things it knows it needs to pull from, like the old black and white horror films like The Mummy, the original, but also just kind of that Flash Gordon sort of appeal to it. It's very Indiana Jones in style. It's got a lot of that kind of fleshy, creepy, crawly sort of thing with hot pokers and eyes. All that stuff is fantastic. The only thing that I don't like, it bothered me at the time when I was a kid, it obviously bothers me now, is just the mix of the 90s CGI, which we all know was pretty bad at the time. I just prefer more of the blood and the dirt and the grit and everything. I liked everything to have more texture. I don't think it needed all the computer stuff. It's more eerie that way. It's more gross that way. But yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity in The Mummy, and I think there's a sense of fun to it. I think the characters are, for the most part, fairly strong and distinguishable. I don't know if I agree that Evelyn and Rick have great romantic chemistry. It's been a while since I've seen the film, but I remember just thinking Evelyn, Rachel Weisz, I just remember thinking that she was a standout in the film. And I remember this was early on in her career, if I recall. She was very young at the time. And yeah, I just think she completely stole the show. And I thought, this woman has it. She's got to be a great actress. And obviously she went on to win an Oscar and all that. And one other thing I have to say about The Mummy is, and this might be the best element about the film, is it's the score. And it's done by the legendary Jerry Goldsmith, who, in the 90s, and like he was doing a lot of movies that I think were beneath him, quite frankly. And yet he's just so incredible that he's just giving them all these amazing scores. Like he did the score to Mulan. And it's like, not that that's a bad movie or anything, but like listen to that score, and it's powerful, it's intense, it's Jerry Goldsmith. And The Mummy, the score to The Mummy is fabulous. It is just so Maurice Jarre in style, like a David Lean movie, very Lawrence of Arabia. If anything, I recommend just listening to the score. I think it really transports you, and I think that's something that a lot of the scores these days just don't have. The Best Years of Our Lives, deep with meaning and a timeless message of we endure the challenges of today in the hope of a better tomorrow. Yeah, I like The Best Years of Our Lives. It's a movie that I liked it more, I think, when I was younger, but not to say that I don't still like it today. It's one of those movies that it's very much a product of its era. You understood why it came out at the time. You understood why it won Best Picture of the Year. It was kind of meant to touch a nerve of sorts. The year was 1946. War is obviously very, very heavy on the minds of Americans. And I think the film, it is interesting because, yeah, I like the idea of it being this like big ensemble of all these different little stories going on. They could have gone more for that like epic sweeping love story in the midst of war or something, but no, they kind of went more for the realism of it. Now, is it a little bit schmaltzy? Sure. I think it tends to get a little bit too sentimental for me. But it's always saved, I think, a lot of the time because there's really great performances in it. I'm a huge Dana Andrews fan, and so I really enjoyed his storyline. I really like Virginia Mayo in the film as well. She's a name you don't hear very often these days, but I thought she was fantastic in her day. But I think what really grounds the film and keeps it from becoming too sentimental is the casting of Harold Russell. Just because obviously he was a real war veteran, and he's not an actor, obviously, and yet there was something about that really, really works. There was something to his awkwardness on screen that just felt so painful and so raw, and a lot more moving, quite frankly, than the trained actors on screen, the ones that actually have all kinds of experience in front of a camera. His story by far is the most emotionally engaging, and so I actually really do recommend this movie for all kinds of people. Again, this is one that you really don't hear talked about very much, and so I'm kind of glad to see you bring it up. It's refreshing. Barry Lyndon, the most gorgeous movie I've ever watched, with smooth narration and subtle themes, which makes the film broad and natural, transcendental experience every time. Yes, and honestly, you're saying it, so succinctly there, and me, I'm so long-winded, I'll talk forever and say nothing, but yes, I watched Barry Lyndon very recently because Ryan O'Neal passed away, and it seemed fitting. And I was just floored by it. I mean, I'm always so shocked. Each time I come back to that film, it feels like I've never seen it before. Or I'm just amazed at how much it changes in my mind. It's finally starting to catch on more, and I'm so happy about that because I've been waiting for that for so many years. But there's still some resistance, and it is because it is a period piece. But to me, it's like anything that's a Stanley Kubrick film, like who cares what genre it's supposed to be, so far as the packaging. It's Stanley Kubrick, so whatever he's going to do with it, he's going to make it his own. And he absolutely does that here. I think it's amazing just because most of these types of movies, these period pieces, are so dependent on the behavior, the mannerisms, comedy of manners type stuff. When you think of period pieces of this nature, they're usually very, very dependent on the dialogue, just because a lot of the behavior, the formalities of that time are so integral to the society. Whether you're talking business or, like manipulation, whatever, slow boil romances, it's all done through words. And yet Barry Lyndon has so little dialogue in it. And it's all about the images. It's all about the in-between. Most movies will never have just one image that is a stunner, that just leaves you breathless. And some of the really great movies work all the way up to that moment. It might have one moment like that, maybe two, maybe three in a really good movie. Barry Lyndon is full of them, as in almost every single shot is a classic. And I find the coldness within the society where the humanity just wants to peer through, which is very similar to, I think, Stanley Kubrick's style on the surface. Weirdly, when you combine that, you might think it might be too removed, too cold. Weirdly, it starts to have kind of the opposite effect for me, where there's something to the silences and there's something to the lighting and everything. It's like where you feel the power and the pain and the heartbreak of everything, which makes it, for me, maybe one of the most personal period pieces of its type to ever be made. And again, one of the most unique for sure. One of the most poetic, most beautiful movie experiences I've ever had. This is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time for sure. Probably always will be. So obviously it goes without saying that it's one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick films, but I think it's so honest. There's so little that is phony about Stanley Kubrick, and I really, really feel that about Barry Lyndon. Again, there's just something achingly vulnerable about it. My favorite movie is David Lynch's 1997 film Lost Highway. It was the first movie I saw with a non-linear narrative structure, and it completely blew my 14-year-old mind at the time. What I found particularly interesting was how the sound and some of the early scenes could create a tense atmosphere in a seemingly uneventful static shot of a living room. I believe it's safe to say that this film single-handedly changed my perspective on cinema and also contributed to my growing interest in exploring sound and unconventional music to this day. That's a fantastic explanation, and very, important to David Lynch is sound, and obviously David Lynch loves to play with music as well. I mean, he is a musician, more an experimental kind of electronic musician, but a musician nonetheless. But yeah, I think that, in movies like Lost Highway or movies like Eraserhead, the music, kind of that gurgly, almost like muffled, muted sort of feeling where it's almost like you can be watching a movie and there could be two people talking to each other, but while you're watching it, it's almost like the sound is coming from the other room. It's very, very weird, but it gives you that feeling of, yes, it's like removed. It's outside of this dimension in a sort of way. It feels very, very trippy, very much like you are on like the beginning of an acid trip, which I've said many times before. I actually do agree with you. I think, like the static of just like an empty room is so eerie in that film, and also in movies like Mulholland Drive. And I do think that the opening, the first act of Lost Highway is just really, really intriguing. I did a review of Lost Highway a long time ago. It's a movie that I'm less familiar with compared to other David Lynch films that I've seen so many times. But in that review, I talked about how I felt it was a little bit skeletal compared to, movies that he was able to flesh out later, like Inland Empire and Mulholland Drive. And while there's so many things in the film that I really admire and always stay with me, there was something about it that always felt just a little bit half-baked compared to the ideas in those films that, again, feel fully fleshed out to me. But I like the idea in Lost Highway that it's more from the perspective of a man, because that really changes things compared to Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. I look at those three films as almost like part of a David Lynch trilogy, more of the meta-examination within him, I think. But yeah, I think Lost Highway, it does feel like their very first entry of that. And then it would slowly develop into something more rich, I think. But that said, a lot of people have told me I should go back and revisit it because maybe I might find new things about it to enjoy. I know that like Criterion Channel came out with, I think, like a remastered version or something. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing it again. And, eventually I would like to do like a David Lynch retrospective video or like a rankings video or something. I don't know when that would be, but obviously I would need to see that again. Yeah, so those are a few of them, guys. And you guys have excellent taste and good explanations, and yeah, I enjoy hearing what you have to say. That is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. And welcome to the new members. If you're interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.